All right. Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming. We appreciate everybody coming out for this, for the PPP loan forgiveness webinar. I don't know if it's your thirst for knowledge, your confidence in us, or just the desperation that's going on to learn about this. But whatever it is, we're glad you're here. We hope you learned something today. First of all, I want to thank Campolo, Middleton, McCormick, and CMM Strategies for being our technology sponsor. Joe Campolo has been a friend of mine for a while now. We do a lot of work together. You know, during this whole process, the whole COVID-19 issue, since that started, outside of my wife and my team here, you know, I've probably spoken to Joe about it as much as anybody else about what's happening. And one of the things that Campolo, Middleton, McCormick did when this first started was they created their own coronavirus hotline for companies who were in trouble or in need of an attorney that didn't have someone to bounce ideas off of. So they started that hotline. That number is 631-738-6781 or coronarelief@cmmllp.com. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Joe for a minute to say a few words, and then we'll get into the seminar. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Alan. And to everybody out there, you know, Alan comes across as a very modest guy, but you know, they say that leaders aren't born, leaders are made. And you know, probably the two most stressful times I've ever had in business, about 18 months ago, when my dad, who was our controller, died. I knew I had a true friend and partner in business because Alan was the first person to call me and say, "I'll be there in the morning, and we'll get through this." And he did. And the onset of COVID-19 for me and for every other business here on Long Island, here in New York, was probably the most stressful thing that anybody could go through, because we're all going through it together. And you know, Alan stepped up to the plate again and has been incredibly accessible, not just to me, but to clients and friends that are incredibly important to our firm. His work ethic has been tireless, and his work ethic has been relentless. And that's when you learn who's really in your foxhole and who's not. You know, we have really challenging times ahead of us. I'm calling it the Rubik's Cube of business right now. Every time we make one turn, 30 other factors come in to help us. For those who didn't get PPP in the first round, and I didn't, and I have to tell you that was one of the most darkest days when you find out you didn't get it. You know, now that we've gotten it, it turns the focus to a whole nother set of anxiety, and that is, what do I do with it? And how do I use it? Because I think the reality and the practicality of everyone is that we're not going to be really recovered by June. And 8 weeks is not enough time. And we're all hoping that Treasury is going to extend that 8-week period. But that's not a given, right? It's not a given. And so what we're going to learn today is how to utilize and maximize the forgiveness piece of PPP. But I do want to say that this is not the only use of PPP. And Alan and I have been talking about it, and I'm sure he's going to do future webinars on it. Alan and I have been talking about the fact that forgiveness is only one turn of that Rubik's Cube. For PPP, it's still a 24-month term loan, no payments due for 6 months. It's not collateralized at a 1% interest rate. So there's cash flow there for businesses. So maximizing forgiveness, which is what Alan is going to go through today, is an important part of it, of course. But utilizing, maintaining, and sustaining cash flow is the most critical thing right now for all of Long Island's business. You know, we're strong, we're resilient, we'll get through this together, but we got to be smart. And Alan's a really smart guy, and he's going to be able to teach you guys a lot today. So Alan, thanks so much for your leadership here on Long Island right now. We need you, and we need everybody really doing smart business right now. So thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. Thanks for those kind words. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to go through the loan forgiveness calculation at a high level with PowerPoint, and then as I mentioned, we created a tool, an Excel tool, to to help you calculate how the amount of forgiveness. So we're going to go through that tool, and then after we go through that, I'm going to do an example as well. So we're going to go through the process sort of 3 times, and hopefully you learn from it. With regards to what Joe was talking about, that forgiveness is one piece of it. I mean, one of the big questions now is, how far do you reach in order to get the loan forgiveness? Is it worth it to pay employees that may not be working and that sort of thing? That's a question that you've got to really, go through with your advisors. And, is that something, again, is that something that you want to do? So with that, I'm going to jump into the PowerPoint presentation. So with regards to PPP loan forgiveness, the first question is, so why am I qualified to speak on this? Because, at the end of the day, I'm, really my background is in tax. I work with entrepreneurs and businesses. So the PPP loans. So it was created by the CARES Act, which was signed in the end of March. Prior to that, when the bill first came out, it was about 250 pages. And when we looked at everything that was in the initial bill, and then as it progressed to the law that got signed, the law that got signed was close to 900 pages. We realized that the PPP program was the holy grail in the act. So we really dove into it head first from the time it was 250 pages. So as I said, so what we're gonna do today is we're gonna go through this PowerPoint presentation. Then I'm going to show you the workbook and how it's going to help you calculate and really track what your forgiveness is during the 8-week period from the time that you get the money. Later on in the day, we're going to send the workbook to all the attendees, and keeping in mind that the workbook that we send out today is not going to be the workbook that ultimately you're going to use, because as guidance is released, we're going to have to continue to update the workbook, which will announce with email blasts. So if you want, you should sign up on our website for our, to get on our list, or follow us on Facebook or LinkedIn. And also just keep in mind this presentation. This is our interpretation of the guidance. So again, keeping that in mind, let's jump into the presentation. So here, so about us. So we're a local CPA firm. This is my background. We'll send out a copy of the PowerPoint as well. So first, an overview of the process. And just keep in mind everything that we're going to be talking about today. It's not that it's overly difficult. The biggest problem is that we don't have the proper guidance. So the process for the whole loan program is that you obtain the loan, which everybody's hopefully everybody is at the point where they have obtained it. If not, then hopefully that's coming shortly. Once your loan gets funded, you've got 8 weeks to incur and pay what it's called the forgivable expenses. The the expenses that are paid will go through what's included in what as far as what is and is not forgivable. And then in order to calculate the amount that's actually going to be forgiven, your payroll costs must be at least 75% of the total forgiven amount. There's also a reduction based on full-time equivalents. And there's a potential reduction based on payroll reductions that earn less than $100,000. We're going to be, and then subsequent to the 8 weeks, you apply to the bank for loan forgiveness. Bank has 60 days to finalize that amount. And then if a balance remains, then that's the balance that Joe was talking about, that's the balance that gets paid back in 2 years. The part that we're going to be concentrating on today is calculating the forgivable amount. So the 4 pieces of that are incurring and paying the expenses, and then what are the potential reductions in those? The 75% of payroll, full-time equivalent, and the payroll reductions. So first, as far as what is forgivable, what the Act says is it's the expenses incurred and paid during the 8 weeks subsequent to loan funding. And so the payroll costs, which there was a lot of back and forth with what's included in payroll costs when we were actually calculating the loan amount, but that's been pretty well established now that it's cash wages limited to $100,000, payment for sick leave, allowance for separation and dismissal, group health coverage, retirement coverage, and state and local taxes such as unemployment insurance. And then, so as far as the interest on debt, so we're interpreting the interim final rule that it includes interest on debt for mortgages and debt obligations that were in effect prior to February 15, 2020. And we're waiting for further guidance on this. It's a little confusing the way the rule's written, because it says that interest on debt obligations, you're allowed to pay interest on debt obligations with the PPP money, but then when it talks about forgiveness, it's silent to the debt obligation, just talks about mortgages. So and in the expenses that are permitted for the to be paid, it talks about mortgages and it talks about debts. So interest on mortgages and interest on debts. So it's confusing. We're thinking that it's another one of these issues where where it just wasn't written properly. But we're gonna find out more. For now, that's the way that we're presenting this. So that's one item, one non-payroll item. Another non-payroll item is a rent under a lease agreement that was in effect prior to February 15, 2020. And again, in the interim final rule, it talks about vehicle leases being includable in that amount as well. So so it's not just the rent on your on the premises. And again, we're waiting for further guidance. We would think that this is another area that they're going to that they're going to expound on as time goes on. And then The last thing from a payment perspective are utilities. The one item that jumped out to us initially was transportation. I mean, electricity, gas, water, telephone, internet access, but then they also include transportation in there. And again, in the interim final rule, they talk about that gas is included for cars. So again, that's another item. And then if you received an EIDL, that's also included. So this is what is forgivable. All right, and as I said, the percentage, it's limited to the amount forgiven. At least 75% must be related to payroll costs. So what that means, to give a quick example, if you have a loan of $50,000 and you paid $30,000 of payroll costs and $15,000 of non-payroll costs, then the non-payroll costs are going to be limited because they cannot exceed 25% of the total amount forgiven. So in essence, out of the $45,000 of payments, only $40,000 would be forgiven in that instance. And we'll go through more examples later as well. So, and again, this PowerPoint is meant to be more of a high-level overview as opposed to getting into the weeds. So this is one way that the amount forgiven gets ratcheted down. A second way is if your full-time equivalent employees are reduced during the 8-week period subsequent to receiving funding, as compared to a base period. And I'm not going to get into the details here because I think if I did that right now, I'd probably lose everybody. I think it's easier to see when we look at the workbook how this works. But the important things to take from here is that, number one, if there is a reduction in full-time equivalents, that your forgivable base or forgivable amount can be reduced proportionately. And then second, if you offer a position back to an employee or eliminate the reduction by June 30th, then it will not be considered a reduction for this purpose. So, and again, I'm gonna go through that more when we look at the workbook than right now. And then just from a definition standpoint, full-time equivalent means somebody that works 30 hours a week. So when you're including, so you can include part-time employees up to 30 hours a week. And if you have a salaried employee, regardless of the number of hours that they work, you only include them as one full-time equivalent. So if somebody works 60 hours in a week, they're not two full-time equivalents. That's still one full-time equivalent. So so that's the full-time equivalent. And then we have the payroll reduction. And again, just like the last slide, I'm not going to go through this in detail now. We'll take a closer look at this when we go through the Excel file. The important things here is that, first of all, it relates to employees that earn $100,000 or less. So if you've reduced the salaries of employees that earn more than $100,000, then that's not going to have an effect on the amount forgiven. That being said, also it's the excess over 25% that it's the excess reduction over 25% of the salary reduction that reduces the forgiveness amount. And again, I realize that it can be difficult to grasp when you're looking at this, and when we go into the examples, you'll see it and you'll see how it works in the in practice when we jump into the Excel file. And again, here as well, just like with the full-time equivalents, if you offer the position back and the offer needs to be a written offer and you need to have, and the employee needs to reject the offer and the position needs to be similar to what it was prior. But if you offer the position back or eliminate the reduction by June 30th and eliminate the reduction again, that's by June 30th, again, that's sort of a term of art that we're looking for further guidance on. But if that's done, then again, in this case, it's not considered a reduction. And one of the quirky things about the way the law is written in this area is that the way they define a person that earns $100,000 or more. The $100,000 is based on the earnings in each individual payroll period from 2019. So in other words, if you have a bi-monthly payroll and you pay somebody $80,000 a year and that person gets a $2,000 bonus or commission during a bi-monthly period, that would be effective. They would effectively earn more than $100,000 for that period, and they would be considered a more than $100,000 employee. So again, I mean, the rules here are a little, can be quirky, and again, we're waiting for further guidance. I was joking around that when we get to the end and we get to questions, this can be the easiest question and answer period, because I can tell you right now that most of the answers we're probably waiting for further guidance on. So if I just say we're waiting for further guidance, we're pretty much covered. But again, we'll get there. And then with regards to the maximum forgivable amount, the maximum forgivable amount is the amount of the loan. So if you pay more expenses than the amount of the loan, then you don't get another check from the bank. This is it. You got the one check, which for all intents and purposes could be a not just once in a program check, but once in a lifetime check, given the way that this whole thing has been rolled out. But more will be revealed as time goes on. So with that, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to jump over to the forgiveness tool, and at this time, so let me pull out the forgiveness tool, and at this time, I would like to thank. So Fred Rook, from senior manager with our office, is the architect of this tool, and George Batis has been a great help to Fred and to me to help develop this tool to get this to the point where it is. George has been keeping up on all the technical aspects, as we all are, but George has sort of been leading that charge for the team. So let's take a look at the tool and how it works. So going to the first page. So we have an introduction. This just talks more about the PPP program and sort of how this tool works, a little overview. These are the instructions. I'm not going to go through these instructions right now, but these are the instructions for the tool. I'm going to go through these sort of at a higher level. so you can understand and see how this document flows. We have a documentation tab, so this is the documentation that we'll need. And then we'll get to the forgiveness estimate. So with regards to the forgiveness estimate, so the first thing is that the areas that need to be completed are the beige areas. And you'll see right now there's nothing in this workbook. I'm going to drop a few numbers in here, but then once we get to the example, you'll see exactly how it really works. So this is sort of the summary page, the forgiveness estimate, where all you're really putting in is you're putting in the amount of the loan, and then we're putting in if you received an EIDL grant, that you enter as a negative number because that reduces the amount that you can have forgiven under this program. So so those are the two inputs in this on this page. The so let's go through what's on the other pages, because this is where everything, the other pages are where it flows up to the front page. So here, as I mentioned, there's an 8-week period. There's an 8-week period subsequent to the date that you get the loan that you can use for forgivable expenses. And the 8-week period, or the amounts paid, again, the law says incurred and paid. We don't know if that means we're going to be all on an accrual basis or a cash basis. We're waiting to find that out. So just taking a step back, when it's funny how our thinking has changed from the time this whole, when we first started looking at the loan amount versus where we are today, calculating the forgivable amount. And when, and I'm talking about us as a firm, and when we looked at this initially as a firm, we said, all right, let's be conservative. We don't know how this is going to work, and let's make sure that whatever we apply for, that we're gonna, that we're gonna most likely get. So that's what, and again, that was initially, and then towards the end of the round one of the loan, we were saying, you know what, this is a once, you're only allowed to do this once, you're not allowed to go back again. So we should be aggressive. And right now, I guess that's where our thinking is with this as well, that, so we don't know whether it's going to be a cash basis or accrual basis. So if you got your loan on April 29th and you had a bi-monthly payroll on April 30th, should you include one day for that, or should you include the entire payroll? So right now, what we're saying is to include the entire payroll. And then as we get further guidance, we'll adjust, because the goal right now is to have as much forgivable as possible. And, until we know otherwise, I think we should all, be taking an aggressive position within reason. So here you're going to input. So in the Excel, in the PowerPoint presentation, we talked about your payroll for the 8-week period. If you have employees that were paid in excess of $100,000, that's included here as well. So one of the things that's important with regards to that $100,000 wage limit is whether that's a pay period by pay period limit. So $100,000 is 8 divided by 52 times 100,000 is 15,385. Are you allowed 15,385 per employee for the 8-week period? Or if you have a weekly payroll, is each employee limited to 1,923, which is the 15,385 divided by 8? So if it's the so the way that we read the law is that it's the 8-week period. There's no mention of a pay period by pay period calculation. So again, when you're including employees that earn more than the 15,385, if they haven't reached that limit, again, our view is that it should be included. It should be included here as eligible forgivable payroll. Eventually, for most employees that earn more than the 100, you're going to make it's all going to fall out in the wash anyway. But that's how we're looking at this. And then on top of that, you've got the health insurance, you've got payroll taxes, and you've got pension contributions. And then that's in the top section. In the lower section, we've got the non-payroll costs, which again are the utilities, rent, and interest. And again, as you pay your expenses, so what we're having our clients do is, or we're suggesting that our clients do, is the money that they get from that they receive from the PPP loan to keep it in a separate account, and then either to pay all the expenses from that account, or if that's not reasonable or feasible because they're still getting checks for that account or whatever the story is, then what they should do is pull money out of that account as they pay forgivable expenses from their operating account. So if you were to do that, you can use this worksheet as a summary for an amount that you're going to pull out. So if your payroll costs for the week are $15,000 and there's $1,000 that's say, or they're $20,000 and it's $1,000 that's over the limit, and you paid some health insurance this week, that $21,000, that's the amount that you can move from the one account to the other. And then if you keep the support that supports this schedule, theoretically, you're going to have everything to turn into the bank. So, again, that was the thinking behind this schedule. And then, like I said, so these are the total costs. And then we've got the three calculations: the 75% calculation, the full-time equivalent calculation, and you've got the pay period, and you've got the payroll reduction calculation as well, to see how much it's going to be, your forgiveness amount, your total forgiveness amount is going to be ratcheted down. So if we go into the next page, and the truth is that it doesn't matter which order that you complete these in. We're doing it this way because we thought that it made sort of logical sense, and we're trying to give the context behind all this. And hopefully, if you have the context, then you'll sort of understand what that you'll be a little more diligent as opposed to just sort of entering numbers blindly. So this worksheet, first thing to note is that there's a drop down up here to say whether you have a weekly, a biweekly, or a monthly payroll, to say to see how much data that you need to complete. And for now, let's just keep it at monthly. So some of the things that change as you change that are the number of pay periods during each of these periods, which I'm going to go through these periods in a minute, and the number of hours that a part-time employee, the maximum number of hours that you can include for a part-time employee. So, excuse me. So first, in this row, in row 15, you're going to put in. So let me take a step back. So the way this calculation works is that you take your you have to calculate your full-time equivalents for the 8-week period. That's this section here. Then you have to compare that to one of two periods. The periods are either January 1st through February 29th, 2020, and based on the number of full-time equivalents in that period, or February 15, 2019 through June 30, 2019. One of those two periods, the lesser, where you have the lesser number of FTEs, that's the period that you want to compare to. So down here, all of that is done for you if you complete the correct data up here. So again, first thing is, what's the period? Then what we need to do for each payroll during that period, we need the number of hours for non-salaried employees, up to 130 hours per employee. And then we need the number of salaried employees as well. This is just the actual number of employees that worked during each of these payroll periods. And from that, a monthly average FTE will be calculated. Then for the period January 1st to February 29th, the same thing. We need to enter the hours, and we need to enter the number of salaried employees. And then for the 8-week period, again, for each payroll, we have the number of hours for non-salaried employees, part-time employees limited to 130, and the number of salaried employees. The one nuance here is that, as I mentioned before in the when we were looking at the PowerPoint, if you either offer your employee their job back, or you reduce the elimination of their job by June 30th, they get to be added back and they don't count against you for this calculation. So again, I'm just trying to build piece by piece, and now we've got this is the full-time, the FTE analysis. So these are the three. So that's the significance of the of having these three sections, and then the workbook does the work for you down here and carries it over to the forgiveness estimate as well. And then what we have, this last item is the payroll reduction, which, so a key point here is this only relates to employees that earn $100,000 or less. And so here what the entries are each employee that earns $100,000 or less, you enter the amount of their wages. So if they earn $1,000 a week, this is what we enter this. And then then we need to enter their compensation for the full quarter, the full first quarter of 2020. We need to enter that in this box. And then finally down here, if they got their job back, then if either we offered them and they didn't take their job, or their job, the reduction in the elimination of their job came back by June 30th, we have a drop down here that says yes, that this was the case, and then that will correct to make sure that this calculation is done right. And then just to show, so if you have somebody that earns more than $100,000 and you put them on this worksheet, your column's going to turn red. So that's just sort of a little fail safe, so that in the event that that you do mistakenly put somebody in this column, that it sort of jumps out to you, and that they shouldn't be included in there, so you should eliminate them. So that's the sort of the high level overview of the workbook. And now what I want to do is I want to go to the actual workbook itself. So just give me 1 second. Let's see. So now, all right. So this is what your calculation is going to look like. So what's happening here is, and again, let's just go through this one more time. We'll put it all together. So this company had a $150,000 loan. So now if we go to the data sheet, we see that they have a biweekly payroll or bi-monthly payroll, one of the two. But here we've completed, or they've completed, the total payroll in each pay period, the amount earned by employees in excess of $100,000. We have some health insurance paid. We had some payroll, some state payroll taxes that were paid. And then we've also got their utilities, their rent. They have no interest. So this is the information that you're going to be completing. This is the important information. And as the 8-week period goes on, you can put in estimate numbers for the future, and so that you can track how the forgiveness calculation is going. So this is one set of data. Then we need to look at the full-time equivalent analysis. So in this case, we've got so for the period February 15 through June 30, 2019, non-salaried employees or part-time employees worked this amount of hours: 200, 210, 190. Each employee is limited to 60 hours. You don't want to put more than that. So we get a full-time equivalent number of 3.4. Then we have the salaried employees. There were 2 salaried employees this whole time. So the monthly average of full-time equivalents was 5.4. During the period January 1st through February 29th, very similar. There was no effect. It looks like this company stayed pretty consistent with the number of employees, full-time and part-time. So, but then we see during the PPP loan period that they were affected. That at the when they got their loan, it took them a little while to ramp back up to the number of employees. So, or the number of hours for part-time employees and total number of employees. They had 1 employee, and they brought that last one back on, looks like towards the end of the period. So because we restored the reduction in full-time equivalents, we get to add the person that we restored back. So that our full-time equivalent is 4.88 for the 8-week period. We look at which is less, the period February 15 through June 30, 19, or 1/1 through 2/29/20, which is less. And then we've got our forgiveness, the percentage, the base that's allowed. So in this case, there's going to be a 9% reduction of the forgivable base, and we'll go to when we go through the other calculation, we'll see how everything gets ratcheted down in a couple of minutes. So this is one calculation. The other calculation is for employees that earned less than $100,000. There's a calculation. We need to compare the amount that they earned during the 8-week period to the amount that they earned during the first quarter of 2020. And if their reduction is more than 25%, we also have to take that as a ding to our amount forgiven. And there's a question about this, because if somebody doesn't come back at all, you're losing out on them because of the full-time equivalent, and you're losing out on them 100% here. Is that what was meant or not? Again, we're waiting for further guidance, but the way the law is written now, that's how it works. So if we look at our employee Smith, they earned $8,000 in the 8-week period. During the first quarter, they earned $20,000. So in order to make the $20,000 the equivalent of the 8, we need to take 8/13 of the 20. The difference is $4,307. we're allowed a reduction of 25%. So $1,230 is the amount that our forgiven amount is going to be reduced by. And again, this is all done by the workbook. This isn't something that you need to think about, but just so you understand where the calculations are coming from. And this person worked through the entire period, so there was no issue with whether the reduction was eliminated. So that's for Smith and Jones. For James, we brought them back. We brought him or her back by in periods 6, 7, and 8, weeks 6, 7, and 8. And even though they earned, there was a big hit that they earned a lot less, much less than the 25%. Since we brought them back, we don't take a hit against that to our forgivable base. So that number is added back because this ultimately, line 40 or cell B40, that's the number that we take the hit on. And then we have the last employee, Sasserath, who didn't work at all, and we offered him a job, but he refused to come back because he's lazy. And even though he earned $12,500 in the first quarter, he earned nothing in this quarter. But since we offered the job back and he didn't take it, this also gets added back, so we don't take a hit on that. So what does this all mean from a big picture perspective? Now that I've probably lost some people in the details, now it's for those that I lost in the details, now it's time to wake back up to look at the to look at the big picture. So from the big picture perspective, we have a $150,000 loan. We paid $157,000 of expenses, but even though we paid $157,000 of expenses, our tentative amount is limited to $150,000, the amount of the loan. And now we look here, and our non-payroll costs are more than 25%. We said that our payroll costs need to be at least 75% of the total cost. So non-payroll costs are limited to 25%. So that 49,200 gets ratcheted down. So our starting point, due to the first limitation of the 75%, is 145,066.67. And then, as I mentioned, on the with regards to the full-time equivalents, we have a 9, because we don't have the proper full-time equivalent number. We take a 9% hit. It's 9% of the 145 is 13,494. And then we have the payroll reductions. Again, even though we've got some large payroll reductions because we restored them by, or at least offered a job to them by June 30th, we don't have to take the full hit of 12,738. We only have to take a hit of 1,846. So the bottom line here, one of the key takeaways is we have a $150,000 loan. We paid about almost $160,000 of expenses. However, only $129,725 gets forgiven. That's why this calculation is so important. And and as I mentioned before, that everything is changing pretty rapidly, and and because of that, what we need to so we need to stay current on what's going on. And so in the last week, again, this is in the last week, what's happened in the last week. So this is where they came out with that rule. It was late Sunday, like Sunday evening, that they posted an additional, they posted several additional to the FAQs the two primary sources that we look at, I'll tell you our secret, we look at the FAQs and we look at the interim final rule. And, but the interim final rule is static right now. There's going to be another one issued for forgiveness. That's what we're really waiting for, or the initial one will be updated. But the FAQs are where the changes are coming in sort of fast and furious. So Sunday night they came out with the rule that, or the question that if an employer lays an employee off, offers to rehire them, but the employee declines the offer, then the forgiveness amount will not be reduced due to this employee. And those were some of the add backs that you saw in the forgiveness tool. So that was number one. A couple of days later, they came out. Originally, so there's been a lot of discussion about the statement that everybody who applied for the loan signed off on, which is that current economic uncertainty makes this loan request necessary to support the ongoing operations of the applicant. So originally, if you weren't sure about what that statement meant, as many of us are unsure, even though I do have my own personal feelings on that, but the thought there, or the rule was that if you returned your money by May 7th, then they couldn't hold that against you. So what they did during this week, I forget if it was Monday or Tuesday, but they said that borrowers have until May 14th to return the proceeds under this safe harbor rule. And they're also going to issue further guidance as far as what that statement actually means before May 14th. Hopefully that's not coming out the evening of May 13th. But that's something that sounds like we'll be seeing over the weekend or hopefully early next week, so that we have a little time to deal with it and make decisions based on that. And then finally, last Thursday, the IRS issued notice 2020-32, indicating that the forgivable expenses with PPP loan proceeds will not be tax deductible. In that, so what they were basically saying is that it's almost like you're not getting a double tax benefit because the proceeds coming in aren't taxable. So they said because the proceeds coming in aren't taxable, you don't get the tax deduction related to it. Now there's a bipartisan bill in the Senate to reverse the effects, to say, wait a second, that wasn't the intent of Congress. The intent was for those expenses to be deductible. So now we're going to see how that plays out over time. And then so with that, I know before the seminar we probably had somewhere in the neighborhood of I don't know, probably about 70 questions or so. And I think now we're ready for Fred and George to join us with those questions and some other questions that have come up, I'm sure, during the presentation or that have been submitted during the presentation. So so I guess that George, do you want to lead this this part of it?
Yeah, I'll go over some of the questions. I mean, obviously we don't have much time, but whatever we don't get to, we'll shoot out emails to whoever asks questions to try to respond to as many questions as possible. So one of the main questions that's been coming out through the Q&As right now has been employees making over 100,000, are they completely excluded? No, they are not completely excluded. Any employee that makes over 100,000, they're limited to that 100,000 for their payroll compensation, which comes out to $15,384.62 for that 8-week period. Basically, it's taking the 100,000 divided by 52 times 8. Another one question that we've been getting very often is regarding sole proprietors, Schedule Cs, and partners of LLCs that have self-employment income. All three of those are basically treated the same. The forgiveness is based on their 2019 Schedule C income or self-employment income from the partnership. The maximum compensation that could be forgiven for them is $15,384.62, which is basically that same calculation, the $100,000, which is the limit, divided by 52 times 8, since you get the 8 weeks limit. Plus, and on top of that, you could include any retirement benefits, health insurance costs, utilities, rent, mortgage obligations, similar to just like you would if it was a business. It's the same thing for sole proprietorships. Can you increase employee salary? This question keeps coming through. There's nothing in the law that says you can't increase anyone's salaries. I'd assume that they'd want you to increase salaries. Be cautious on this, though. If you're increasing salaries of partners or related party members, there might be some limitation on that coming in future guidance from the SBA, but at the moment, there's nothing that says you can't increase anyone's salary. One question that keeps coming through again is also, what do you do with employees that refuse to come back? The SBA released the FAQs on this. They basically said that as long as you send them in writing that their position is available at the moment, they have to decline that position. If they decline that position, then you're not held liable for this. So there's no reduction in your FTEs or the salaries based on them not coming back. But you will have to document this. Who controls the forgiveness? The bank is the one that's going to come down to the final calculation of the forgiveness. All the documentation is going to be submitted to your bank. Each bank might request different documentation, but it should be in the similar information that they'll request. Bank statements, payroll tax returns, payroll summaries, and then the bank is going to make the final calculation as to what gets forgiven. Let's see, what other questions do we have? Are cell phones considered utilities? As long as the cell phone's under the business's name or you've included the deduction in the past on your returns, it should be considered a utility just like any other telephone would be. Is the EIDL grant tax-free? So the EIDL grant is treated the same way as the PPP loan proceeds. The IRS came out with guidance last week basically saying that even though you're not picking up the proceeds that come in as income, when you pay expenses through this money, the expenses are not considered deductible. Basically, they're not letting you get a double benefit from it. That being said, the AICPA has released guidance to the SBA requesting that they are allowed to take the deduction for these expenses, and some politicians are lobbying along with this as well, trying to basically say that, hey, the whole point of this is to help businesses. Let's give them this benefit. Another question is, how long do employees need to stay on payroll once the 8 weeks are over? There's no answer to this as of yet. In the CARES Act, when that was passed, there was another section on another loan program, the Main Street loans, which basically said that you needed to keep employees on through September 30th. That being said, as final guidance was issued regarding this loan program, they eased that wording as well, just basically saying make your best effort to keep employees on payroll. When it comes to PPP loans, there hasn't been any wording issued for this as well, but we believe that since they're easing wording on other loans, at some point they're going to ease the restrictions on this as well and not require people to keep people on payroll long past June 30th, especially if businesses are not able to be opened yet. Can I rehire new workers, or am I required to keep the old workers on payroll? Again, this is something that we'll need more guidance on. As long as you offer the position to the old employee and he refuses to come back and you document this, you won't be penalized for that employee. But if you fire this employee and replace him with someone new, it might hurt your calculation in terms of reduction of salaries. So at the moment, there might be a negative impact on this. We'll have to wait for more guidance before we give a 100% answer on this. Does the 401k or retirement plan safe harbor related 2019 payroll count towards forgiveness? As of now, we would say no to that, since the wording in the law is incurred and paid. That's incurred in 2019, so that would not be incurred during the 8-week period, so you would not get any forgiveness based on that amount.
I think George, we're bumping up against our time.
Again, whoever we didn't get to answer, we'll definitely shoot you an email and we'll go over the rest of the questions and hopefully we could answer them.
Yeah, and I want to thank everybody for attending. We'll be having more of these. We'll have more of these as more guidance is issued. And like I said before, too, we'll be sending out email blasts. So if you want to be on that list, go to our website and sign up. Hope to see you soon. Thank you.
Thank you.